Live. There we go. Am I good to start?
I didn't see I was on mute. Okay, sorry, everybody. Hi, good afternoon. This is Joe Stewart, Fairbanks Economic Development Corporation. We're here for this week's Energy for All Alaska Task Force. We do have a special meeting with a special subject. So for the special meeting, it is actually about 1:05 in the afternoon, Tuesday, July 11th for record. And our special guest and special presentation is Mr. Thomas Lochner, and he's the director of the Alaska Broadband Office. Here to give the assemblage an overview of the office and its work. As everyone knows, first of all, as COVID made quite glaringly apparent, there's still a lot of areas, even in our major communities, major urban centers, that have limited or non-existent connectivity. But substantial resources have been made available by the federal government to help bridge that gap. And we do have a state office that's there to help us effectuate that. And so I would hand it over to you, Mr. Lochner, please. The floor is yours. Thanks for coming.
Fantastic. And go ahead and ask questions as you have them. You don't have to wait till the end. I'm going to go through quickly what the composition of the office is, other items that were covered by House Bill 363, and then launch into the impact of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and move through how that's going to impact the state of Alaska. So covering off the broadband office, there's 4 of us in the broadband office: myself, the director, deputy director Lisa Von Bargen, our tribal liaison Melissa Kukesh, and our administrative specialist Anessa Firo. And then you can see there's a dashed line. Originally, the office was going to have a grant administrator and a program manager, but we realized that we already have that expertise for the program manager within the office through the deputy director. And then the grant administrators, rather than try and hire 2 folks and train them up on being utility players and having all aspects of the grant process, that would go to the Division of Community and Regional Affairs, who has 8 grant specialists. We would augment their staff with 2 more and then pull whatever resources we need depending on where we were with the grant program. House Bill 3, which created the Broadband Office, also created a Broadband Advisory Board, and the Broadband Advisory Board was selected through the Governor's Office of Boards and Commissions. And you can see it's a wide range of representatives. I can send this out so you don't have to take a picture if you want. A wide range of representatives. And we had the healthcare community was represented by Stuart Ferguson from ANTHC, but he has retired. And so we do have that open position. If you know of anybody who would like to be on the board, please apply through the Governor's Boards and Commissions. In addition, House Bill 363 contemplated a technical advisory group. It's not a board, but it's a group that's under the board. And that is 8 folks, with 1 being already filled with the broadband industry representative, Christine O'Connor, and then 7 different engineering expertise. We have filled 4 of those positions, or those openings, and the board is looking for 3 more. I believe it's aerospace engineer, mechanical engineer, and civil engineer. So if you know anybody, they can contact Anessa Firo with those applications. Under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, there are 2 primary programs which the Broadband Office will be managing. One is the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment, BEAD, which the total for the nation was 42.45, and Digital Equity, which I think is grossly underfunded at 2.75 billion. And the reason the Broadband Office has already received 2 grants. The DE grant, we are having Rasmussen Foundation manage, and that will develop a plan that's due September 30th to the NTIA. The National Telecommunications and Information Administration. And then the BEAD planning grant of $5 million will cover off all of the next 7 years for the broadband office that you saw on the earlier slide, as well as those grants and additional consultants we may need.
If you don't mind, sir, this you said Rasmussen doing a planning effort.
Yes.
What's their scope?
To develop the DE plan that's due September 30th.
Oh, I mean, geographically, are we talking the whole state of Alaska? Is it discrete
Yes.
areas?
Yes,
okay.
The whole state. And they have gone out to a lot of nonprofits and enlisted the help of nonprofits and have paid them to have listening sessions all over the state. The digital equity, keying off the Rasmussen effort, is targeted toward the 8 covered populations you see in the upper block. And then the funding will come in 3 tranches. The first one is the planning grant. The second one will be a notice of funding opportunity for capacity grants. And what that means is that the allocation for Alaska of that 1.44 billion will come to the state of Alaska, and then the state of Alaska will have sub-grantees for that to assist the covered populations. And then the competitive grants of the 1.25 billion, the federal government will run themselves. The broadband office will have no impact on that, and folks can just apply directly. One of the ways I look at this is the BEAD, or Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Funding, that 42 billion is for a pen. But the pen is a useless item unless folks know how to form letters and form punctuation, and then form sentences, and then form paragraphs. And only then can they write down their story. And what I see as digital equity is everything after the pen. So it's making sure that folks know how to get on their computer, know how to run virus software, know how to be able to get to different locations they need to get to, and effectively sign up for programs or create websites, and not be harmed through poor cybersecurity. So it's all of those things post-pen that the digital equity plan will be covering. Because we see that there may not be enough money, what we're looking for is those things that have the greatest impact. We had a digital equity summit, and the representatives from the sight impaired community had a just absolutely startling statistic that 70% of the sight impaired community is unemployed. If we can do something through digital equity to drop that by 10% or even 5% or some percentage, so that we can start having folks be more into the digital economy, that's what our goal is on this. The BEAD funding, the 42.45 billion, Alaska's allocation was announced. I used to have the 3 ways they were going to calculate it, but they've already done it. And our number is 1 billion, 17 million, 139,672 and 42 cents. We figured they added the 42 cents because it's the meaning of the universe. We will then have to hold, well, I'll get to the timeline, but how that will be allocated is based on 3 levels of priority, and they're below here. The first is the unserved, underserved, and then community anchor institutions. The unserved will be both the unserved areas and unserved locations. One of my examples in Anchorage is that the lower Rabbit Creek area, there's about 150 houses that are unserved, even in the metropolitan area of Anchorage. And then obviously there's a lot of communities and villages out in ultra remote Alaska that are unserved. If there's funding left over from that, then the second level is the underserved. And we're running into a bit of a challenge there, and we need to work with the NTIA on this. in that there are other programs that only had a threshold of 25/3 rather than 100 megabits download and 20 megabits upload. And once those get affected, it will move those communities out of the unserved into the underserved. And as a consequence, you'll see on the map with the network ideas, technically the broadband office will have to skip those when designing networks or having networks designed to get to different locations.
Yeah,
So
Thomas, real quick, though, that's like CAF 2 you're mostly referring to?
No, I'm referring to the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program through the NTIA, the USDA Reconnect programs, Community Connect programs, and then USDA loans.
Okay.
And then those are, everything that I just mentioned are one-time capital inputs. The CAF program and the Alaska Plan and ACAM are ongoing operational programs. And then if there's money after the unserved, there's the community anchor institutions to try and get 1 gig over 1 gig to all of the locations that are listed as community anchor institutions. And then if there's money after that, all other initiatives.
If you don't mind, Mr. Lochner, can you roll back a slide or two? Actually, two. It seems that there's a bit of a disconnect. So you're saying that, so right now the slide we're looking at is that digital equity component that you said was unfunded or to be underfunded by your estimation?
That's Thomas Lochner's opinion only.
That's fine, but that seems to be more robustly funded than the actual infrastructural deployment funds, which is your next slide. I'm seeing almost $3 billion worth of funding for this and only $1 billion for the other.
So both of those numbers, that 2.75 billion and the 42.45 billion, are nationwide numbers. So when you look, when you get down to this slide, of the 1.44 billion, there'll be an allocation, and it may follow the same ratio that the planning grant did.
No, that clarifies it. Thanks. Okay. Okay.
No worries. This is the one-time funding that has already come into the state, as well as that is about to come into the state. So the upper box is pre-2023, and then the lower box is so far this year. Getting to Gary's comment, these are the ongoing support mechanisms, primarily through the FCC. You can see there's a couple of small state ones. But the big ones are the E-rate program, the rural healthcare program, and then the Alaska Plan. And then Alaska Communications is the only one who is receiving Connect America Fund or CAF 2 funding. So this is what Alaska looks like. The served areas are in green. And this map has changed from earlier maps because in earlier maps, the broadband office just guessed based on advertising collateral from ISPs. But now we have, and once I'm done with this, I'll log into the FCC's mapping, and the broadband office has taken the time to go through and look at the broadband mapping that the FCC did to recalculate different locations. These are the remaining areas that are the charter of the broadband office to reach. The yellow dots, they turn from pink to yellow, are open USDA applications. Some of these have been awarded, and they showed up in that earlier chart that showed the 2023 awards. So for example, Wales and Diomede have been awarded. All of the Norton Sound locations have been awarded. Tyonek has been awarded. McCarthy has been awarded. And then there's potential awards in the Southeast and up here, but they haven't been announced yet. So as we get more and more information, we will change those yellow dots to blue dots or change them back to salmon eggs, depending on whether they got awards or not. This is the network ideas to reach the unserved locations. And we don't call them network designs because we're not engineers, even though we stayed at a Holiday Inn last night. And then we posted this on the website in late February and asked anybody who had interest to beat it up and tell us where we got it wrong. We were happy to have that done so that we could then have those discussions and correct it where as possible. So for example, St. Paul and St. George were served out of Nelson Lagoon, but given that the AU Aleutians terminates in Unalaska, that saved about $60 million going from Unalaska to St. George rather than from Nelson Lagoon. Small stuff like that. Additionally, this line has changed significantly because of the award from NTIA for the middle mile, for Quintillion, for the Nome to Homer Express run. So it then goes all the way around and then hooks into Homer instead of stopping at the GCI or the Bethel Native Corporation fiber. Oh, this slide updates it with, you can see Diomede and Wales have been awarded. This is the new Nome to Homer Express run. The Norton Sound locations have all been awarded. Emonak and Alaskanak have been awarded. And like I said, Tyonek and McCarthy. So there are still some in here that have not been awarded, but we're optimistic that they will be positive awards. So we got $1 billion. The revised estimate to build is 1.9 billion. And then that begs the question, well, how do we get there from here? And the way we're doing it is we're looking at all of the opportunities that are potentially going to come into Alaska. There's another $1 billion associated with the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Fund. And then there is going to be a Reconnect Round 5, as well as additional Community Connect opportunities. And so that will help offset the $1 billion that is necessary. Once we added those awards, it has dropped the price down to 1.65, I believe it is, billion. So with every additional award from other grant instruments, it allows us to get closer to that $1 billion number that the BEAD received. As far as timing goes, this was done on the 29th, so the red line is the 29th rather than the 11th. We are late on the 5-year action plan, and we are working on the initial proposal. The 5-year action plan is a document that is a checkbox item with the NTIA. It is necessary, but it does not it does not lead to anything, I suppose is the best way to put it. The initial proposal, which started that 180-day shot clock started on July 1st, does have impact. And so the initial proposal is the grant format that the state will be proposing to the NTIA using. And once we submit that, we'll have, we're trying to get that done by this Friday so we can have a 30-day comment period and submit it, because we know that with the NTIA, they're going to have at least 4 different cure committees. It first goes to our federal program officer. He does a series of cures. It then goes to a different state's federal program officer. They do a set of cures. It then goes to a committee within the NTIA. They'll do a set of cures. It'll then go to the assistant secretary for sign off, and then post that, it'll go to legal. So we anticipate that that will that approval will happen at the end of this year or early next year, which then tees us off to then run our grant program, which we will submit the grants out. We're estimating for 3 months to get replies back. Once we get the replies back, we've allocated approximately 3 months to then do the judgments and get cures on our side, the Alaska Broadband Offices. So we're expecting the money to go out between June, July, and August of next year is the first awards that will be made. We are also looking at potentially staggering, because we have to take into account workforce development. And from what we have seen, given infrastructure projects in Alaska, as well as these potentially mega projects, there's the high potential that there won't be the trained labor force to accomplish all of them at the same time. What's next? We've held 4 tribal consultations, and we will additionally hold 12 more for a total of 16. And then each block of 4 will have a different topic. That's government-to-government consultations with the tribal governments. From the 5-year action plan data that we've been looking at, we will incorporate that into the initial proposal. The scoring of the grants, there are 3 items that are required within the notice of funding opportunity that will make up 75% of all scoring. And you can see the 3 of them there: efficient use of funding, and that includes matching, affordability, and they describe affordability on fiber projects as 1 gigabit over 1 gigabit to consumers, and then fair labor practices. They don't say, obviously the breakdown looks like it should be 25, 25, 25, but they don't dictate that, so that we will have slightly different, or proposing slightly different percentages. There are secondary criteria that they don't give us what the percentages will be. And so given that it's Alaska and trying to get something done in the ultra remote locations by a set date, that will be a very small percentage. And then the remaining 24-ish% is all other criteria. And we have not settled on the final, but we do want to make sure that the number 2 bullet there of operating costs, that this is sustainable, affordable, and scalable, and that these networks will be in place for the next 10 to 15 years rather than just being built and abandoned within 3. On the digital,
if you don't mind pausing on that last slide for just one moment. First, I would remind everyone who's online, as always, these Tuesday afternoon today meetings are for your benefit. So if you have any questions, comments, you can go ahead and put them in the chat box. It's being monitored. You may put up your hand to be acknowledged, or you can simply take yourself off mute as Gary did and fire away. So I do buried in there under primary criteria is how big is the match? Are we going to have a discussion further on regarding kind of like really, the kind of funds that will need to be brought to bear by a local community or a specific project, again, to access these other funds, because it's not just 100% free money?
Correct. The notice of funding opportunity match requirement is 25%. So if there's $1 billion on the table, that's $250 million that I don't know that anybody has in their back pocket. So there are 2 mechanisms available to get around that. One is in the notice of funding opportunity, again, if it is a high cost area, and we're still waiting for the NTIA to tell us what the high cost areas are within Alaska. It might be all of Alaska. Then the 25% match is waived. And if there are areas of the state that are not high cost areas, the broadband office can ask for a waiver from the 25% match. But there has to be a great reason if we're required to ask for a waiver. The other thing that the broadband office is looking at is having some level of match And we haven't determined, and we'd love feedback on what level that might be, which would maybe the level of match is the applicants are required to fund their own permitting. And so the shot clock for the 4-year build time doesn't start until after the permitting, because we have found that permitting can take 2 to 3 years just by itself. And so that's a concern for us. But we're trying to come up with different clever ideas on how to, as Dan Sullivan calls them, the Beltway bandits just come up and go for 100% funding and not really effectively utilize it. So we are open to all the conversations around that. Jomo, did that answer your question?
Yes. We do have another comment or question in the chat box. Okay. When will we find out what are the high cost areas in Alaska? You did mention that that was something that was being looked at.
On June 30th.
Oh, we found out.
No, we did not. So their target was June 30th. And we have a weekly meeting with them every Thursday morning. And so that's the first question we ask out of the gate. And they said, it's coming. It's like, okay. When is that?
Okay.
So we don't know. We're working to find that out.
Hi,
and
this is
sorry, we will post it on our website as soon as we know.
Okay. Yes, Miss Haney.
Hey, Jomo, how are you doing? I just want to ask, years ago, with Representative Wilson and Representative, they had this education task force, and they were looking at the cost of broadband. This was like in 2012. Lynn Gaddis and Tammy Wilson, they had this whole task force on it. How many of, like, for example, it's like 16,000 in one community per student, and it was like 25,000 in another community for another student. And I'm kind of curious, have those costs come down, and have those communities since that time been served? Because it would be useful to have kind of a backward looking, to me, if I was looking for areas that needed to be served, I would have first gone back to that task force where that was all laid out, and then, updated it from the FCC data. But that's why I was kind of wondering if anybody's looked at that.
I haven't looked at the 2011 task force work, but I have looked at the broadband task force work that was done in 2018 that the governor convened.
Right. Well, no, I was just kind of wondering because that was, the one thing about the education piece was that it was driving up the costs of rural education so high. And I understand that the education, the medical, and then general government, they'll have different pots of money. So, but once you get it into one group in one community, it's easier to piggyback out, if you get my meaning.
I do get your meaning. The challenge is what we have seen, and the reason there are so many salmon eggs on this chart is that, for example, I'll just pick on Kipnuk. There's a microwave to Kipnuk, but it is part of a much larger microwave system. And while the system is robust, it does have limitations. So if you have 500 meg to the school and 500 meg to the clinic, and you only have 1.25 gigabits total, that only leaves 250 meg for the remainder of the community. And if you have a relatively large community, then it does start creating an impact to the consumer and business users when most of the bandwidth is used for the clinic and the school. So it doesn't follow that necessarily they're served. That's why we have these network ideas, because rather than microwave, the NTIA is focused on trying to get fiber everywhere, because with the exception of electronics, fiber is an unlimited resource. So you can go up to 10 gig or 100 gig. with an electronic card swap out.
Let me ask you one more question, if that's okay, if I can prevail upon you.
Absolutely.
There's quite a few people who are kind of thinking that perhaps we should be waiting for Elon Musk's is it Skynet? What's it called? Starlink.
Starlink,
That's what it's called. Starlink, Skynet. I don't know. I must have been
the
from a movie
Terminator.
or something. Starlink. Yeah. To come online and just use that instead. And I'm never really quite sure how to, quite frankly, answer that. So what do you have a response, or are you guys looking at that, or help me out here?
Starlink and OneWeb, both low Earth orbit satellite systems, are good products within themselves, but like the microwave, have a limited capacity. So what I've heard in Anchorage is they're not selling any more Starlink receivers in Anchorage because they've got full penetration of their broadband available. With the quintillion cut off of Licktock Point on the north, I know that there's a company in the North Slope that has purchased 100% of all of OneWeb's capacity as those satellites move over, and it's 400 meg, and it's less than a tenth of what they need. So if you need 4 gig and you can only get 400 meg, it creates a challenge. That being said, I've heard lots of great things about both of those product sets. I just don't know if they're large enough.
So we're talking about a capacity issue then in the final analysis. Okay.
Yes.
I have great grandchildren in New Witzik, so I'm always looking, for me, the ultimate, I guess, kind of thing would be that if I could, get a regular email from them from time to time. But that's kind of my fail safe and judging how the internet is in rural Alaska. So anyway, thanks.
Yes. Starlink should work in Niwixit. Additionally, I know that getting back up here to here, Aztac has a USDA request to build fiber to Niwixit. I know that's a tangent for this group, so I apologize.
Actually, not a bad tangent though, because I'll be honest with you, I'm tech stupid, as described earlier. Can you go back to that map?
Sure.
And just at like a very high level, kind of what are our options as you get more far flung, or even places like within, again, our community? What are really we talking about as far as options that are, again, going to boost capacity on a physical basis, infrastructure basis? I think cell towers and microwave towers, which you just said, all of those have certain limitations on their capacity.
I believe the answer, at least the notice of funding opportunities, initial conceptualization is fiber everywhere.
So that's kind of the goal.
It is.
Okay. All right. Well, do we have any further questions, or are we okay to start moving along again?
Well, this is Patty Pearsall, and
yes, please.
I don't even know if I have a question, but I wanted to let you know that of my situation. First of all, Fairbanks is considered to be a rural area, right? And I'm in the middle of town. I do not have water service. I do not have sewer service. I do not have any cable service. And I was on Alaska Connect, who put a dish onto my building and aimed it at some tower downtown. And then they sent a letter saying, we're getting out of the business. There are other options and we don't want to be involved anymore. So they gave me a 90-day period of time to find somebody else. I did find the group in Homer.
Spit spots.
Yes, Spitspot. And everything was fine then, although that they said, they called me back and said, well, we can't get to you until June 27th. And that was beyond my 90-day period. So eventually I ended up with ACS. I have a DSL service now. With Alaska Connect, my service was I think it was supposed to be 4 megabytes per second, but mostly I had like 2. And now with ACS, I have to tell you, I'm happy. I have a maximum of 24 megabytes of service. And to me, that's like 10 times more than I had before. So I'm pretty stoked. But does any of this mean anything for me and for people like me? I do have a few neighbors also who have companies close by who don't have any real service either.
Yes. And Patty, if you'll indulge me, I'll finish with the presentation, then I'll pull up the FCC's broadband map and we'll look at your location specifically as part of generally looking at what the FCC has done with regard to served and unserved locations. Is that okay?
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, sir.
Moving to the digital equity. Next step, there's a core planning team and a steering committee. There's a draft of the plan that is being evaluated by the steering committee, and then they're looking at to have that out for public comment. It'll be posted on the Broadband Office's website, I think by the end of this month, for a 30-day comment period. And then if you're part of the Broadband Office's listserv, you will get an email that says all of this and when it's on so that folks can review it and make comments. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, we've deployed, or Rasmussen has deployed, Alaskan subgrantees, primarily the nonprofits that are associated with the 8 covered groups for digital equity listening sessions. I've been privileged to listen to or sit in on several of those, and it's very informative. And then we encourage and engage the public at every step. So this is the team and all of our information. And we are happy to hear from anybody at any time, but would prefer not 1 o'clock in the morning.
Or just don't expect a prompt response that late.
Right, right.
All right.
Now, to then get to the 2 questions, let me do 2 things here. Let me get to.
So I did pull up, I'm looking at our second monitor here, the office's website.
Yep.
And I did see it just popped right up that stay connected. I clicked the button and that's where I put in my email address to again get on the listserv. I wasn't sure if you would want to just do a quick walk through your website. There's quite a bit of goodies on there already.
I would, but I don't maintain the website. So
Oh, that's fine.
I would have to direct you to our admin specialist.
No, it's fine. Why don't we do this? You were going to pull up something from your end. Some maps. Yeah, here we go.
So this is a website called satellite-map.space. It's super wonderful. You can see this was a recent launch because there's 64 satellites in a row. This is a launch that happened a while ago because it's not 64 and some have been deployed. And so if you wanted to see kind of the timeline of the deployment of Starlink's satellites, you can tell by the length of the different deployment efforts, right? This one is, you can barely see it, it's a line, but they've deployed every other one, so it's harder to see. But I just find this map super, super helpful, right? This one happened quite a while ago, this one here, because it's so short. But if you get to Alaska at any given moment, it will show you how many of Starlink's satellites are over Alaska. Right, 585, 573, and looks like this one's going to pick up. Right, Ketchikan, because they can point at the main corpus of the satellites, gets fantastic service. I was on a conference call with somebody in Bethel, and it was kind of like this one here that's moving across, but I had him run a speed test and he was at 20 meg, and then as the satellite moved over Bethel, I had him run another speed test and he was at 200, and then as it got out here, he was back down at 20 meg. So Starlink continues, and you can see this is an older launch here, that it's the very tail end of that launch. There's only 3 left in that string. Once they put it's called Shell 2, I believe, all of the satellites in the polar orbits that they contemplate, then there'll be much, much better coverage, but it will still be limited until they get the new space laser satellites up.
So all these satellites that we're looking at right now are Starlink.
Correct.
Wow.
Is that a filter?
Go ahead, you ask.
So just curious, is the Starlink a filter on the site then?
Yes, you can see I've got the Starlink highlighted. If I click on this one, it goes to the OneWeb birds.
Oh, interesting.
And the OneWeb birds are all circumpolar. So you can see they all move in one direction, pole to pole.
What's the life on one of those satellites?
I've heard anywhere between 3 and 5 years.
So speaking of satellites, Thomas, one of the broadband task force said that they really should consider anything for a satellite, where, you know, and you kind of reinforce that, looking at not fixed wireless or satellite or microwave, everything is focused toward fiber. The build outs for those are years away, whereas these are becoming more available. Has there been some consideration of considering some amount of support in some form or fashion for the interim with satellite?
That would require a change in the law and also a change in the notice of funding opportunity. And so that hasn't been contemplated.
Okay, I didn't know if that was something you could look at it with your plan. We've been struggling here a little bit in the Fairbanks area. I don't know, maybe you saw an email I sent you a couple of weeks ago, trying to be able to identify the unserved and underserved areas based on the latest FCC maps for the Fairbanks area, because when you zoom out, then you are overwhelmed with those ugly polygons.
Yes.
So in terms of us trying to identify areas where they are underserved or unserved with the specifications that they need to be wired technologies, has there been any effort in your office to be able to make these maps more functional Because we're looking at, you know, you mentioned the RUS funding, you know, and then you mentioned Rabbit Creek is unserved. We're all over the map as to what's served and what's not. And we do have some contiguous areas, but trying to put it all together in line of the maps that we're trying to follow is really hard.
Well, I'm hoping that you're seeing a bunch of green dots on your screen.
Yeah,
So here's the magic decoder ring for the BEAD program.
right.
So for the program that the Alaska Broadband Office is superintending,
Mhm.
it is for all wired and licensed fixed wireless, the fourth
Right.
bullet down under technologies, as
Right.
well as 100 over 20.
Right.
And if I hit close,
Yeah, that's the problem right there. When you zoom out to try to come up with,
Right.
here's a
So that-
contiguous area.
that location does not have 100 over 20.
Yeah, I know the location. I helped build the building.
Well, and then if I click 25 over 3, close,
Right.
that is also still, that is unserved as well as
Yeah.
it's, yes.
Yeah.
It's unserved. If you don't mind me backing out and moving to Nenana as a good example, just as an example. Actually, first, Patty, what is the address where you are?
2610 Davis Road.
Okay, so this one shows that it can't, that you can get 25.3, and then if I click on 100, you can see your location just went to red from green. So it shows it can get 25.3. It is underserved, not unserved. See how it's green now?
Yes, I can't get 25, but it's certainly showing that, yes.
So that location would be the second tier build out. And we have to hit, per the notice of funding opportunity, all the red dots before we can move to the next tier. So in this example, somebody has reported that you can hit 25.3, but we would have to hit all of these red dots around you before we could build to you, because you're considered underserved, not unserved.
Right.
And unfortunately, those are not my rules. However, the good thing is the state will be running a in-state challenge. So Patty, you will have an opportunity to, not as an individual, but through either the municipality, this group we're talking to right now, other nonprofits, and or tribal organizations to challenge this assessment that you can reach 25.
So Thomas, I want to come back to this because what I would like to see, this is GIS data here, right?
I believe so.
So what
I don't manage this map, so
right, I understand that. So this GIS data, the data can be downloaded in some form or fashion.
Yes.
And then to be able to show boundaries in a broader look at it, you know, not quite granular like you are now, to be able to actually show areas that are unserved or underserved, just to be able to show a boundary. So if we're going out and we're going to say this whole area on Goldstream Valley is unserved, we would be able to see that, because right now, if we zoom out, it's overwhelmed by these stupid polygons. Pardon my French.
that's I'm supposed to be nicely political, but I unfortunately find the polygons difficult to work with as well. And so I have downloaded, because I have a license with CostQuest separate, that's very restrictive, unfortunately.
Right.
I have downloaded all of these and I look at them in Google Earth rather than, so when I back out, it just turns the area dark. And And then when I zoom in, I can see the individual dots, but it doesn't do any of the polygons. So I empathize with what you're saying and have found the polygons difficult to work with. And so I've done a workaround.
Okay. 'Cause, yeah, what would like to be nice basically is to have either somebody that you can draw on for the GIS and to be able to just draw boundaries for areas that are covered, you know, in less granular look at it. So if we're looking for, it could be RUS grants, it could be like you talked about with Rabbit Creek potentially. We could say, okay, these whole areas are underserved, or these whole areas are unserved.
And you can kind of get that. Let's see if I do 100/20. Well, let's see if these polygons, see these 3 polygons here, Cessna Way, Air Park.
Yeah.
If I do 25/3, see if they change.
Right.
Actually,
But the
yeah,
boundaries aren't the polygons,
correct.
actually. So this is where I'm trying to
Yes.
be able to show a boundary over some particular area.
Yeah.
So where we look for funding.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Is it possible at all, and would it be useful for that CostQuest download to be made available to your regional partners specific to their geographic region?
We can't unless you sign I think it was $30,000 license with CostQuest. Right, they're
As a hard copy? Or a fixed data as opposed to distributed data?
that they're very restrictive on the use of the underlying data because they want to sell their data. And so they very tightly restrict the subsequent use of that data.
Then I guess the question would be, how closely is the state willing or able to work with the communities with these kinds of specific issues? Like in the Fairbanks area, we have pockets that fall into this category. What would be the availability of that sort of detail to?
Absolutely, I can work with you at this level here and pull in all the locations and I'm happy to work with everybody on the call on their needs, on how to get this information the best way possible and be able to draw those boundaries. I just can't share the underlying information because it's proprietary to CostQuest, unfortunately.
Is just real quick, is the cost plus specific when you have a license, is it specific to a particular area? Or once you have the license, you have the whole country available?
I do not know the answer to that question. I have not tried to download the entire country, but I have downloaded the entire state.
Okay. The last question I had on my list was that I'm understanding that the ISPs are supposed to announce maybe by the end of this year what they're committed to building out in the next several years, and that's going to be incorporated as to part of what's available for grants or not.
Actually, that was kind of along the lines of my question, Mr. Lochner. Again, what's the interplay with the actual service providers?
The broadband office has to have sub-grantee or sub-grants, as the overall grant is to the eligible entity from the NTIA, which is the state, under the notice of funding opportunity. And then there are sub-grantees. The sub-grantees don't have to be the ISPs. So the state of Alaska will be evaluating all grant applications. I'll give you an example that I was going over this morning. There's a tribe on the Kenai Peninsula that wants to build themselves. Municipalities have the opportunity to put in to build themselves. And so to figure that one out, it was just finding the nearest AT&T connection point and whatever the cost that is, And then it's a build to the entire, it's only about 4 miles away, the entire village out. Then they can have what's called network sovereignty, in that they have their network. It plumbs into a dedicated internet access through either AT&T, GCI, Alaska Communications, et cetera. And then working through what the sustainable, affordable, and scalable options are to make sure that it's a concern that I've got in a 15-point margin, so that it's something that can carry forward and be sustainable through time. But we're not requiring it just be ISPs that apply for the subgrantee. I had not heard that the ISPs were going to outline their entire builds for the next 6 years by the end of this year.
Okay, I think it may have just been the incumbent Lex, which in our case up here in Fairbanks, it would be ACS. They also have their CAF2 grant that isn't completed yet, and they don't seem to be telling anybody where they're going next. So in terms of trying to make sure that you're not double dipping, so to speak, how do you know?
Sure. Well, part of our charter is a deconfliction, to make sure that we deconflict.
So what kind of timing is there on that? I know you got an awful lot on your plate. I'm very sympathetic. I hope you know that.
Well, again, the timing on the coming up with the grant program and the scoring is near term. Then we have, as I mentioned, the different curing processes that we have to go through. I apologize. I'm late for my next meeting. And so I've been trying to manage my time well, and I can pick this up at 3 o'clock because my next meeting is until 3:30, and I'm happy to come back to it, but I want to make sure that I'm Oh, no, wait. Oh, never mind. My next meeting is actually something that I wanted to mention to this group. So to finish up my question or my answer to you, Gary, the curing process is going to put letting the grants sometime in early 2024, January, February timeframe. And then it will be, again, something that goes to the street, and anybody who has the wherewithal, the interest, and the ability to one, build per the parameters, and two, have it sustainable for the next 20 years can apply. It could be spit spots. It could be ACS. It could be, Joey Jojo's telco that, but there are going to be some requirements. If it is Joey Jojo's telco, they better have a consultant who has like 5 or 6 years worth of experience if they just started. Tommy Tell, I'll call it. Right. And so we're looking at early next year to let the grants out, 3 months to get the grants back, and then 3-ish months to grade and evaluate the grants, make the awards, and start going mid next year, getting the money out to folks. The meeting that I'm missing is the broadband office. I'll stop sharing, and then if you want to share the screen for the broadband office's website, I think at the bottom of the first page there's QR codes for 3 meetings we hold every single week: Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 2 o'clock each meeting. Yep. So their first 2 are an hour, and the third one is a technical session. And so the first one just started, is open to the public and anybody can attend, but it is tribally centric. The one tomorrow is just a general interest session. We want feedback on folks' experience with their broadband. Kind of what you went through, Patty, is perfect for that type of conversation. And then the one every Thursday, which is a half hour, is for people to call us and beat us up on our network ideas. And we encourage it. So I would put that out there. If you have any influence of folks who you think might want to attend these and have the conversations with us, we are absolutely open to those conversations. These are not presentation meetings. They're more listening sessions on our part to get public feedback.
Are you getting much interest in them?
We are.
That's
I mean,
good.
it's interest over time. So there's maybe 3 or 4 folks that show up, but they're different folks that show up every time.
It's good to know they're useful then.
Yes. Believe me, I want people to attend because I hate sitting around twiddling my thumbs. And then, of course, I start working on other stuff and then people pop in. So, and I'm not a quick shifter.
Well, Mr. Director, thank you so much for this presentation. Thank you everyone for joining us. Okay, if I'm getting the major punchline or one of the last punchlines on this correct in my head, really we're right now in about, say, a 5-6 month timeline to be positioned for when grants become available. So now, well, we're kind of late in the game, but now is definitely the time for groups, individuals, communities, even neighborhoods to get together to assess their needs, figure out how, what potential solutions are so they can position themselves to make grant applications at the top of next year. Fair enough?
Yes. Let me augment that.
Please.
That is for the BEAD section. There are also other grant opportunities. There's going to be Reconnect Round 5, which I think is going to come out at the early next year as well. And the tribal broadband connectivity through the NTIA, which I think will come out this fall, the NOFO will. And again, whenever these come out, we will post them to our website. And if you sign up for the listserv, you'll get an email that says this has just come out.
Outstanding. All right. Well, sir, thank you very much. And for the good of the order, so I guess we're going to wind down. We'll let you get to your next meeting. For the good of the order, FEDC has been asked for some time, if no one else stood up or stepped forward, to organize a kind of a broadband task force here in the community. I am not an expert on this. I flaunt my ignorance, but I know it's important. And it is something that's very important today, but also for our future as a community and economy. So just know that we are going to be trying to pull one together. If you know of any interested parties or folks you think would be good for such a task force, do please let me know. And we're going to start pulling that together, again, recognizing that now's the time to start figuring out what we need and how we think we might address our challenges to be best positioned for, again, the grants that are both available now and becoming more and more available as time goes by. To assist us.
I have 2 right off the top.
Please.
So Charlene Stern.
Okay.
And Michael Braze.
Were these the Fairbanks reps on your group?
That's correct.
Correct.
So Charlene represents tribal governments and Michael represents the university. And so that would give you guys the inside baseball on what's happening with the broadband advisory board.
Outstanding.
Jomo,
Please.
this is Tanya, and we can talk offline. I can tell you some of the people who were involved in the broadband task force between Representative Hopkins's office and Mayor Ward's office. And some other people in the community too. So yeah.
Outstanding. All right. Well, thanks everybody. And again, thanks a million, Hair Director. Outstanding. Okay.
Yes, Thomas.
Thomas. All right, everybody. As always, as has been the case, we're in July. We actually don't usually have meetings in July. We usually take the July off. So I don't have anything lined up, but lots of interesting things in the works. So I may actually be sending out notices of meetings. So just keep your eyes peeled. For now, no, we don't have anything officially scheduled. I'm going to be working to stand up this task force. I think I'm going to make that my special project for the remainder of July. But yeah, just go ahead and keep your eyes and ears peeled. I mean, of course, there's been a lot of energy issues and items in the news, particularly relative to gas supply in Anchorage. As you would expect, I saw this shit coming, 10 years ago, but here we are, and so we have to work it out. But we'll keep an eye on it. All right, everybody, have a great rest of your day, a great rest of your week, a great rest of July if we don't see you before then. And yeah, thanks for joining the task force.
Take care, Jomo, everyone.
Thank you very much.
And I accidentally just cussed on a recording.